Maybe if you paid more attention to your husband, he wouldn't need to find excitement somewhere else. The room went silent. Not because what she said was shocking, because she said it while smiling. A slow, polite smile. The kind people use when they're trying to stab you without getting blood on their hands. I stared at her across the dining table. Crystal glasses. Expensive candles. Fake laughter. And that smile. That awful smile. My husband, Marcus, didn't say a word. Not one. He just looked down at his wine. As if he hadn't heard her. As if the woman insulting his wife wasn't sitting 3 feet away. As if I wasn't sitting there swallowing humiliation in front of 12 people. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like a foundation finally giving way after years of pressure. And the worst part? It wasn't the first time. Not even close. Because disrespect never arrives all at once. It arrives in small doses. Little comments. Little insults. Little betrayals. Until one day you realize you've been drowning for years. And nobody even noticed. Including you. My name is Naomi Brooks. I'm 43 years old. I own 2 successful businesses. I have a master's degree. I employ more than 80 people. And for 11 years. I allow people to treat me like I was lucky to be in the room. Especially my husband. Especially his family. Especially the women he surrounded himself with. The funny thing about quiet women is people mistake silence for weakness. They assume calm means powerless. They assume kindness means blind. They assume patience means stupid. And Marcus had spent years making exactly that mistake. I smiled politely at the woman across the table. Her name was Vanessa. Marcus's business associate. At least that's what he called her. Business associate. The phrase almost made me laugh now. Because everybody at that table knew exactly what she was. Everybody except the people pretending not to. Including me. Or maybe I had known all along. Maybe I just wasn't ready to admit it. Vanessa tilted her head. "Oh my goodness," she said sweetly. "I didn't mean anything by it." Of course she did. People like Vanessa always did. The cruelty was the point. The fake apology was just decoration. I picked up my water glass. Took a slow sip. And said nothing. That bothered her more than an argument ever could. I saw it in her eyes. People who thrive on drama hate emotional discipline. They want a reaction. They want a fight. They want proof they got under your skin. But I had spent most of my life learning how to sit inside discomfort without letting it control me. So I simply smiled. And changed the subject. The dinner continued. But something had shifted. I could feel it. Like a storm moving across water. Invisible. But inevitable. And before the night ended, I would discover just how deep Marcus's betrayal really went. Because while everyone laughed over dessert, a message appeared on Marcus's phone. And he made one tiny mistake. A mistake that changed everything. He left the screen facing upward. Just for a second. Just 1 second. But sometimes 1 second is all you need. The message preview flashed. "Can't stop thinking about tonight." A red heart. Then another. Then "miss you already." My stomach dropped. Not because I was surprised. Because I wasn't. Not really. The truth is that suspicion hurts. But confirmation has a different kind of pain. It removes all your excuses. All your hope. All your denial. All the stories you've been telling yourself. Suddenly there is nowhere left to hide. Marcus noticed my expression. His hand moved quickly. Too quickly. He grabbed the phone. Locked the screen. And forced a smile. Everything about that movement screamed guilt. But he still thought I was blind. That was the part that hurt the most. Not the cheating. The arrogance. The certainty that he could disrespect me repeatedly, and I'd never connect the dots. That I'd just keep smiling. Keep forgiving. Keep accepting crumbs. I excused myself and went to the bathroom. Not because I was emotional. Because I needed privacy. I stared into the mirror. The woman staring back looked calm. Composed. Controlled. But her eyes looked different. They looked tired. 11 years tired. I thought about every canceled anniversary. Every unexplained trip. Every late-night meeting. Every strange excuse. Every time my intuition whispered and I told it to be quiet. And standing there under that harsh bathroom light, I finally asked myself a question. What exactly am I protecting? The marriage? Or the illusion of it? The answer arrived immediately, and it terrified me, because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. I returned to the table, finished dinner, smiled when appropriate, thanked the host, and drove home beside a man who wouldn't stop talking. Marcus always talked more when he was nervous. It was one of his tells. Traffic, weather, business, sports, anything, everything. Words spilling out faster than usual, as if noise could cover guilt. I let him talk. The silence between my responses seemed to make him uncomfortable. Good. For once. When we got home, he disappeared into the shower. And that's when another mistake happened. He left his tablet unlocked, on the kitchen counter, almost like fate had finally gotten tired of being subtle. I stared at it, then walked away, then came back, then walked away again, because deep down I already knew. I didn't need evidence. I needed courage, and courage is sometimes harder to find than proof. Eventually I picked it up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from grief, because some part of me already understood what I was about to lose. I opened the messages, and the world changed. Months of conversations, photos, plans, lies, dozens of women. Not one, not two, dozens. Some casual, some emotional, some ongoing. Enough betrayal to fill several marriages. I sat down slowly. The kitchen suddenly felt cold, very cold. And then I saw something worse, much worse. Messages about me, jokes, mocking comments, private conversations where Marcus described me as boring, predictable, safe. One message hit harder than all the others. She's so trusting. I stared at those words. Read them again, and again, and again. She's so trusting. Not loving, not loyal, not supportive. Trusting. As if my faith in my husband was some kind of weakness. As if loyalty made me foolish. As if honesty made me pathetic. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes. Maybe hours. But eventually something unexpected happened. The tears stopped. The shaking stopped. The heartbreak remained. But something else arrived. Clarity. Cold. Sharp. Clarity. For years I've been trying to save a marriage. How many lies had become normal? How many people knew? The questions followed me all day. By evening, I found myself sitting in my car across from an upscale hotel downtown. The kind of place where everybody acts important. The kind of place where secrets are expensive. The lobby glowed with warm golden lights. Luxury. Status. Appearance. Marcus loved places like that. Places that made him feel powerful. Places where image mattered more than character. I watched the entrance. Waited. Observed. The same way I had learned to do years ago while building my companies. People reveal more than they realize when they think nobody is paying attention. At 7:43 p.m. Marcus arrived. And my stomach twisted. Not because he was there. Because he looked happy. Excited. Like a teenager sneaking off to meet a crush. Like a man with absolutely no guilt. No shame. No hesitation. That hurt more than I expected. 11 years. And he walked into that hotel smiling. A few minutes later, another woman arrived. Tall. Designer handbag. Expensive heels. Confident walk. The kind of confidence that comes from believing you're winning. She checked her reflection in the glass door before entering. That tiny gesture told me everything. This wasn't love. This was ego. Validation. Competition. Performance. And she had no idea she was participating in a game she didn't understand. I waited another 20 minutes before entering. The hotel smelled like expensive perfume and polished marble. The receptionist greeted me warmly. I smiled back. Calm. Friendly. Professional. The same way I smiled during board meetings. The same way I smiled when negotiating contracts worth millions. People often mistake calmness for vulnerability. It remains one of the most useful mistakes they make. A quiet conversation with hotel staff confirmed what I needed. Roommate 14. Exactly as the message had said. The confirmation should have devastated me. Instead, it brought something unexpected. Relief. Because uncertainty had finally ended. The truth was ugly, but at least it was real. And reality is easier to handle than suspicion. When I got home, Marcus returned around midnight. Smiling. Relaxed. Whistling. That sound nearly broke me. Because it wasn't the whistle itself. It was what it represented. A man returning from betrayal in a good mood. A man who believed he'd fooled everyone. A man who thought his wife was exactly as trusting as he had described her. He wrapped his arms around me from behind. Long day. I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. Very long, I said. Mine too. The lie slid out effortlessly. Like breathing. Like muscle memory. And that's when I realized something disturbing. Marcus wasn't lying because he had to. He was lying because he'd become comfortable doing it. That difference matters. A lot. Over the next 2 weeks, pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. 1 affair became 3. 3 became 7. 7 became a number so ridiculous I stopped counting. Every discovery revealed another layer. Another betrayal. Another hidden life. Another version of Marcus I had never met. And then I learned something that made my blood run cold. The women knew about each other. At least some of them did. Not all. But enough. Enough to create a twisted little ecosystem of deception. Enough to make me realize I wasn't dealing with a simple affair. I was dealing with a man addicted to attention. Addicted to being admired. Addicted to feeling important. The women weren't the point. His ego was. An ego is a dangerous thing. Especially when it goes unchecked. The next emotional blow arrived unexpectedly. Through Marcus's sister. A woman named Danielle. Danielle and I had always been cordial. Never close. But cordial. One afternoon she invited me to lunch. Something felt strange immediately. The smile was too bright. The questions too careful. The concern too rehearsed. Halfway through the meal she leaned forward. You know Marcus works very hard. I nodded. He does. And sometimes successful men need freedom. There it was. The real reason for the lunch. Not concern. Not family. Damage control. My chest tightened. Freedom. I asked quietly. She stirred her drink. Men are different. Different. I hated that word. Different. A word people use when they don't want to say selfish. Different. A word people use when they don't want accountability. Different. A word people use when they expect women to tolerate behavior they would never accept themselves. Danielle sighed dramatically. You're lucky to have him. Lucky. That word again. The entire family loved that word. As if Marcus had rescued me. As if my achievements didn't exist. As if my loyalty was irrelevant. As if I should be grateful for scraps. I smiled politely, finished my coffee, and said nothing. But internally, another piece of me detached. Another emotional thread snapped. Because in that moment I understood something important. The disrespect wasn't accidental. It was cultural. A family tradition. A shared belief system. They genuinely thought Marcus was the prize. No matter what he did. No matter who he hurt. No matter how many lies he told. That realization changed the way I viewed everything. A few days later, something happened that would eventually make headlines. Although none of us knew it yet. Marcus announced he was leaving for a business conference. 3 days. 2 nights. Important clients. Important meetings. Important opportunities. The usual script. The only problem? The conference didn't exist. I checked. Carefully. Quietly. No conference. No registration. No event. Nothing. Just another lie. Except this one felt different. Bigger. Riskier. More reckless. Almost desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. Huge mistakes. The day Marcus left, I watched him load his suitcase into the car. He looked unusually excited. Almost nervous. Like someone anticipating an adventure. Before leaving, he kissed my forehead. Again. That same routine. That same performance. Love you. I smiled. Have fun. For a split second, something flickered across his face. Confusion. Maybe guilt. Maybe suspicion. Then it vanished. And he drove away. I waited exactly 30 minutes. Then I began making phone calls. Not emotional calls. Strategic calls. The kind that gather information. The kind that reveal patterns. The kind that expose reality. By sunset, I knew where he was staying, who he was with, and what they planned to do. The arrogance of cheating people never ceases to amaze me. They spend enormous energy hiding things, yet somehow leave trails everywhere. Because arrogance creates carelessness. And Marcus had become very careless. That night I sat alone on my back patio, listening to the wind move through the trees, thinking about dignity. That word kept returning. Dignity. Not revenge. Not anger. Dignity. Because people often misunderstand what breaks relationships. It isn't always betrayal. Sometimes it's repeated disrespect. The constant message that your feelings matter less. Your trust matters less. Your humanity matters less. And eventually a person reaches a limit. Not a screaming limit. Not a dramatic limit. A quiet one. The most dangerous kind. The kind where emotions disappear. The kind where attachment dies. The kind where peace becomes more important than preserving appearances. I was reaching that place, and Marcus didn't even realize it. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, he was busy creating the biggest mistake of his life. The mistake that would soon become impossible to hide. The mistake that would involve emergency responders, hotel management, humiliated witnesses, and a level of public embarrassment nobody could have predicted. But before any of that happened, one final truth surfaced. A truth so outrageous it actually made me laugh. One of Marcus's girlfriends believed he was planning to divorce me and marry her. Another believed he was already separated. A third believed she was the only woman. And somehow each woman thought she was special. Special. That word stayed with me. Because manipulators love making people feel special. It's cheaper than honesty. Marcus had built an entire fantasy empire out of that one word. Special. Special enough to lie to. Special enough to deceive. Special enough to use. But never special enough for the truth. And the saddest part? Some of those women weren't bad people. Some were victims too. Different victims. But victims nonetheless. That realization complicated everything. Because life is rarely as simple as heroes and villains. Sometimes it's wounded people colliding with selfish people. And the damage spreads everywhere. The following afternoon my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Something told me to answer. Hello. Silence. Then a woman spoke. Softly. Carefully. Are you Naomi? Every instinct immediately activated. Yes. Another pause. Then she said a sentence that changed everything. A sentence that transformed suspicion into certainty. A sentence that made the entire situation far bigger than I imagined. I'm calling because I think we're both being lied to. The world seemed to stop. I stood slowly, heart pounding. Not from fear. From anticipation. Because sometimes truth arrives quietly. Not with explosions. Not with shouting. Just one sentence. One unexpected phone call. One stranger. And suddenly everything changes. What that woman revealed over the next hour would expose Marcus completely. Not just as a cheater, but as something far worse. A man whose lies had become so tangled that collapse was inevitable. And that collapse was already beginning. What none of us knew was that within 48 hours, emergency vehicles would be parked outside a luxury hotel. Hotel guests would be recording videos. People would be whispering in hallways. And Marcus would be praying for the ground to swallow him whole. Because every lie eventually sends a bill. And his was finally coming due. I'm calling because I think we're both being lied to. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The woman on the phone sounded nervous. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying confusion for too long. My name is Erica, she said quietly. And Marcus told me he was divorced. I closed my eyes. Not because I was shocked. Because I wasn't. At that point, almost nothing about Marcus surprised me anymore. But what Erica revealed next changed everything. Marcus hadn't simply been cheating. He'd been creating entirely different identities depending on who he was talking to. To some women, he was trapped in a miserable marriage. To others, he was separated. To others, he was planning a fresh start. To others, he was practically single already. Different stories. Different promises. Different realities. The same liar. For over an hour, Erica and I compared timelines, messages, trips, excuses, stories. The deeper we dug, the uglier it became. And then something happened that neither of us expected. We started laughing. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. The same hotel, the same excuses, the same rehearsed speeches, the same promises. Marcus wasn't some master manipulator. He was recycling the same script, over and over, like a salesman who thought nobody would ever compare notes. By the end of that conversation, one thing became painfully clear. Marcus's entire secret life was collapsing, and he didn't even know it. Yet, the next morning I woke up strangely calm. No tears, no panic, no rage, just peace. For the first time in months, maybe years, because the truth had finally replaced uncertainty. And uncertainty is exhausting. Truth hurts. But confusion drained. The man who spent years managing appearances had become the center of a spectacle. The irony was almost poetic. For years Marcus obsessed over image, status, perception, validation. Now he couldn't control any of it. Not one piece. And that terrified him. 3 hours later my phone rang. Marcus. I looked at the screen. Let it ring. Then ring again. Then again. 22 missed calls. 31 text messages. The panic practically leaked through the phone. Finally I answered. Silence. Then breathing. Heavy breathing. And for the first time in 11 years. Marcus sounded afraid. Naomi. I said nothing. Just listened. Because silence is powerful. Especially when someone is desperate. Please let me explain. There it was. The universal anthem of people who get caught. Not before. After. Always after. I walked onto my patio, sat down, and watched the evening sun settle over the neighborhood. Explain what? His voice cracked, and that told me everything. Not regret. Fear. There is a difference. A huge difference. I'm sorry. I closed my eyes. Those words should have meant something. Years ago they would have. Now they felt empty, like decorations after a party ended. Marcus, I said quietly. When were you planning to tell me? Silence. A long silence. Then another. Because there wasn't an answer. There never is. People don't plan confessions. They plan concealment. Until concealment fails. Finally he spoke. I made mistakes. Mistakes. Such a small word. Such a convenient word. A word people use when the truth feels too ugly. Affairs weren't mistakes. Lies weren't mistakes. Manipulation wasn't a mistake. Those were choices. Repeated choices. Thousands of them. I know, I said. Another silence. Then something unexpected happened. Marcus started crying. Real crying. Not performative. Not calculated. Genuine. And strangely, I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No anger. No triumph. Just distance. Emotional distance. Like watching weather through a window. That's when I realized the marriage was already over. Not because of the cheating. Because of what came before it. The disrespect. The arrogance. The assumption that I would tolerate anything. That was the true ending. Everything else was just paperwork. A week later Marcus returned home. And we sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The same table where we'd shared birthdays. Celebrations. Plans. Dreams. Now it felt unfamiliar. Like furniture belonging to strangers. He looked exhausted. Older somehow. Smaller. Not physically. Emotionally. The collapse of illusion does that to people. Especially when they've spent years living inside it. I never thought you'd leave. There it was. The truth. Not about the affairs. About his assumptions. I studied him carefully. You never thought I'd choose myself. His eyes filled with tears. Because he knew I was right. The entire relationship had been built on one dangerous belief. That my loyalty was unconditional. No matter what he did. No matter how far he pushed. No matter how little respect he showed. He believed I would stay. Forever. Many people confuse patience with permission. Marcus had made that mistake for years. Now he was paying for it. The divorce itself was surprisingly peaceful. Painful. But peaceful. No screaming. No revenge. No dramatic courtroom scenes. Just consequences. The natural kind. The kind created by choices. Friends stopped calling him. Business relationships shifted. Family members who once defended him suddenly grew quiet. Funny how loyalty changes when facts become public. Very funny. And very revealing. A few months later, I was sitting in a small salon waiting for my appointment when an older woman beside me started a conversation. She must have been in her 70s. Elegant. Observant. The kind of woman who notices everything. We talked casually for a while. Then somehow the subject of divorce came up. She smiled gently. You know what real freedom is? I shook my head. She leaned closer. Not needing people to be who you hoped they'd become. I sat there quietly. Because those words landed deep. Very deep. Not needing people to be who you hoped they'd become. Acceptance. That's real peace. Not approval. Acceptance. The ability to see reality clearly. And choose yourself anyway. Months passed. Then a year. Life became quieter. Healthier. Lighter. My businesses grew. My friendships deepened. My laughter returned. Most importantly, my peace returned. And peace is priceless. One afternoon I ran into Erica for coffee. We had become unlikely friends. Two women connected by the same storm. We talked for hours. At one point she laughed and said, "Do you ever think about how hard he worked to impress everybody?" I smiled. Every day. She shook her head. And he lost the one person who actually loved him. That stayed with me. Because it was true. Marcus spent years chasing admiration, while taking genuine love for granted. And by the time he recognized the difference, it was too late. The strangest part? I don't hate him. I really don't. Hate requires energy. And I finally learned something important. Peace grows when resentment leaves. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it simply means putting down a burden you no longer wish to carry. And that's exactly what I did. I put it down. The anger. The humiliation. The betrayal. The need for explanations. The need for justice. The need for him to understand. I released all of it. Because freedom begins when validation stops being necessary. The woman who sat crying in that bathroom years ago would barely recognize me now. Not because I became stronger. Because I remembered I already was. The strength had always been there. Buried beneath compromise. Buried beneath patience. Buried beneath hope. Waiting to be reclaimed. And maybe that's the real lesson. Real class isn't money. Real class isn't status. Real class isn't appearances. Real class is how you treat people when you think they can't benefit you. Real class is respect. Real class is dignity. Real class is integrity when nobody is watching. Marcus spent years performing success. But performance and character are not the same thing. Not even close. As for me, I finally stopped shrinking to make other people comfortable. I stopped apologizing for my worth. I stopped carrying relationships by myself. And in return, life gave me something far more valuable than revenge. It gave me peace. And peace is a beautiful thing. So now I want to ask you something. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have confronted Marcus immediately? Would you have gathered evidence first? Or would you have walked away the moment your intuition started whispering? Let me know down in the comments. And tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how many different places these stories reach. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and join us for